Reverend LaDana Clark joins me now, and Reverend Clark is known as LADYJAM, the outreach hip-hop pastor and founder of the Church in the Hood. And Reverend Clark, welcome to WIOX.
Thank you so much, Don.
So I heard you speak recently at the Justice for George Floyd rally. It was in Oneonta. And I wonder if you could tell our listeners the main points that you made at the demonstration as it relates to institutional racism, because that's what's really going on here, I think.
Right. Well, policing in this country, in my own personal opinion, has not made its full transition from the days of the police being created to police people of color, which was said at a meeting in Atlanta by a former police officer, a white police officer, years ago when I was in a meeting in, not Atlanta, I'm sorry, this was in New Jersey, and I was at a meeting with a police officer who had said that, in the beginning, they created law enforcement to protect white people from black people. So just to make that point, so you have to change the institution from the inside out in order to deal with policing that is disproportionately being problematic for people of color versus any other race of people. And we were definitely lifting up the fact that here we have another death, the death of George Floyd at the hands of police, and, for everybody to see that this was pretty much a murder. Some people call it a lynching. I can't say that the police officers came to work that day to kill a man. I would never say that as a former police officer. But as a former police officer, I know the tactics that were used, and for this man to be begging for his life, literally begging for his life, that's what happened. So,
let me ask you this, though. As a former police officer, you've identified the problem. What's the fix? That's important.
Yes, it is. It is. The fix is a whole lot of different people getting together and reviewing policies, departmental policies, making sure that there is an open door to people of color on the forces, and that they are going to be treated equally, not coming in just to be a token on their staff, and also reviewing the instances of the cases so you'll have the stats to look at to see if there's a disproportionate situation going on. If you don't have the stats, then you can't really call it out, So that would have to happen. And then it's just so much inequality. As an African American, there's a litany, It's just, but when you deal with it, it just all goes back to the way that we are treated disproportionately to other people.
The police department should not be an occupying force in a neighborhood or in a community. Mm-hmm. The makeup of the force, to the extent possible, should reflect the composition of the community.
I agree.
That is one way to approach the inequality and essentially what's happening now that results in police brutality.
I agree. I agree with that. And, do I have all the answers? Does any one person have all the answers? No. That's why it's important to not just have meetings, not just to organize, but to follow up. But it's equally important for us to be aware of this problem at the level that it is now, because I'm a civil rights baby, okay? So I remember, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and when he was shot and killed, I remember how everything time just stood still. And, so for so many years, this stuff to be perpetuated, we've got to figure out how to stop it. It's a virus, but this is one we can cure. But it has to be done with people, helping people, people working with people organizing, for these changes in their organizations or policies. And also, as a minister of the gospel of Jesus Christ, I know there's some things that only God can do, which is what Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. said. I can't make somebody love me. Only God can do that. So there are things that have to be done from a clerical standpoint as well in working to get people to come together, even in our congregations. So it's all hands on deck at this point to change this. And it also comes to bullying. I know of young people in Otsego County that have been bullied just because of they're a mixed race child. So that goes back to systematic racism as well that has been allowed. So it doesn't help, to have people in leadership that perpetuate certain mentalities either.
Talking about leadership, I knew Mayor David Dinkins of New York City very well. I covered him hundreds, maybe even thousands of times for 5 or 6 years.
Awesome.
Anyway, he said, if I heard him say this once, I heard him say it 50 times. He said, we don't have to love each other, but we must respect each other. Yes,
we do. And it has to begin there, and I believe that's where the peace comes in. You can't do anything in chaos, and you definitely can't do anything if the people at the table don't have an ounce of respect for each other. I agree.
Before we talk more about George Floyd, police brutality, and the protest demonstrations that are associated with this current situation, I'd like to ask you about yourself, because you have quite a background. You're a self-described Christian rap activist. You said you were also a police officer. You also say that you're an entertainer. Do you mix politics, Jesus, and entertainment?
That's a wonderful question. The subtitle for my ministry is the Faith in Hip Hop Movement. And what does that mean? Church in the Hood, the Faith in Hip Hop Movement, what does that mean? It means it's about hip hop for life versus death. It's about Jesus. It's about faith, and it's about social, justice, for people of color and anybody that finds themselves in a situation that is dehumanizing. As far as I'm concerned, but anybody that's been marginalized, whether it's in the LGBTQ community, it doesn't matter to me. I just want people to have a better quality of life, and that's what I've been working on, to stop the hate, start the healing, save lives, and decrease the body bags for at this point, approximately 35 years of my life. The past 35 years of my life, that's what I've been doing around the country. And I've also, been a victim of dealing with the police, which, we can get into later.
You mentioned for the last 35 years you've been doing this kind of work, and I went to your website and looked at what you've been doing. Let me go through a brief list here. Okay. It's not that brief. You've had a lot of jobs, so let me name some of them. You drove school buses, trucks. You served as a minister in Austin, St. Louis, Louisville, Huntsville, Atlanta, New Jersey, and now Oneonta. You worked as an outreach hip-hop pastor, a gospel rapper, an LGBTQ activist, an auxiliary police officer, a Board of Education security officer. I'm going to continue. There's more. You were a clergy mentor for the New Jersey Department of Corrections. You served in the Army National Guard. You're now an Oneonta public transit driver. Have you really done all of those things? I actually have.
And that's how I was able, and I want to make sure you didn't say I was an officer in Austin, Texas, or anything like that. I was an
I said minister.
Okay, I just want to be sure. All right, I actually have, and that's how all those jobs. Whenever God would give me assignment to another city, I'd say, "Okay, God, okay, where we going next?" Okay, God would send me to those cities. So it was my job to find a job. Okay, because I wasn't going to take money from my ministry. I've been in ministry 35 years without a salary. Okay, I just. Donations here and there have been fine, or as an entertainer, I was able to get contracts, and that's how I was able to support myself and not have to, without having a congregation and not, asking people for money in return for services that I believe God gave me for free. So, yeah.
So as an outreach hip-hop pastor and the founder of the Church in the Hood, do you have an actual physical church here in upstate New York?
I don't have my own, but I meet at the United Presbyterian Church in Oneonta, New York. They have been kind to give me a space there, and I can't wait till we can get back in that space. We will be talking about that real soon. But, it's a church, and it's so cool because the church actually has a gray hood on it, and my ministry is called Church in the Hood.
All right. What's the address of the church?
It's located right. It used to be where it's across the street from where the old Friendlies used to be.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, that's pretty much
the Red Door Church, I think it's called sometimes.
Yeah, the Red Door Church. You got it.
Over the centuries,
and I just want to say that Reverend Pastor Cynthia Levitt Walton is the pastor there.
Over the centuries, Christians have interpreted the Bible multiple ways and used all kinds of different styles to preach what they call the Word of God. Mm-hmm. And I was raised a Catholic, and they have these, and back when the Mass was in Latin and all of that, and they had the vestments and the incense and all the fancy stuff. Mm-hmm. You have a different approach. You're using hip-hop when you preach. Mm-hmm. Explain why that's a way of bringing people in.
Well, first of all, hip-hop is a culture that has gone global, so it reaches people from all walks of life, all different backgrounds, and it is not something that I do because it's in vogue, if you will, but it's something that's in my soul, since I was one of the DJs that first played the music on the radio years ago and used to bring the legends of hip-hop, Run DMC, Salt and Pepper, Heavy D and the Boys, Fat Boys, all of them on stage years ago. And then I also broke Will Smith, DJ Jazzy Jeff and Will Smith's first record on the radio, which was DJ Jazzy Jeff and the Fresh Prince. I broke their first record on the radio called Girls Ain't Nothing But Trouble when it was just a 12-inch white label and black magic marker. So that's the root of it.
Some people do things. They do bad things with it. If we can do some more good things with it, we be all right. Come on, they preaching now. Come on. Woo! Come on. It's the holy hookup, baby. Woo! We got the OJs preaching right now through music. Come on in. Don't let money rule ya. Come on.
And then I used to be what you call a break dancer. I used to spin on my back and on my knees, so I'm an outgrowth of the culture. And so God showed me how I can use the culture to get out God's message and to reach young people. And if you will, just as the young people would say, give people a gospel that's lit. with the streetwise Christian theology.
So I got to add,
I'm also from the streets of New York, so I just combine all of that stuff. and I love music, as the OJs once said. So it's just all intertwined.
So I got to ask you, as a breakdancer, how are your knees?
My knees are good. They're very good. I was very careful. Okay.
All right. What about the performance, the entertainer in you, rapping? When did you start doing that, and where did you learn to be an entertainer? Because that's an important part of reaching people. Yes.
Well, I'll tell you when I figured it out. I started in kindergarten. I was an advocate fan of Louis Armstrong, and to the point where... and I don't know, maybe it was first or second grade, something like that, when I was in school. I wrote his family, because the teacher gave us assignment to write a letter to whomever we wanted to, and I wanted to write to Louis Armstrong. And his family was so moved by my letter, they wrote my school back and let us know that before he could get a chance to read it, he had passed away. And then at my school in Queens, Jamaica, Queens, I also was blessed to hear, I don't know if who this folk singer was, but all I remember is her singing, "Cockles and mussels, alive, alive, oh, this land is your land, this land is my land," and I just remember in my ear, I'll never forget, and she introduced us to the acoustic guitar and folk music. So my family played jazz at home. They played, of course, the Motown sound. Because the radio stations also played the Beatles, and I just grew up with music. Music was always something I was drawn to. And then I went to a concert with James Brown at 9 years old.
Oh my!
And we stood in line for a couple of hours. And then by the time we finally got in, I saw the Godfather of Soul come on stage, and I saw him break it down. I saw them throw the cape on him, and I said, you know what? If he's the hardest working man in the entertainment industry, I want to be the hardest working woman when I grow up. and then I went to sleep. They told me I went to sleep. I was tired at 9 years old.
Well, waiting in line, that can happen.
Yeah, and then, of course, with the influence of Michael Jackson, which, to me, just was an incredible, incredible entertainer. And this is what these folks did, They had a message, they had a story to tell, they had a purpose, and then they backed it up with their music. And that's why I'm more like an entertainer on a mission.
You mentioned Louis Armstrong. I recommend that folks go visit his home and museum in Queens. It's quite an experience.
Wow. That's awesome. Awesome. I'm going to keep that in the back of my head.
Yeah, you can look it up on the web and find out all the particulars.
Oh, wow. That's incredible. That's incredible. Thank you for sharing that with me. Absolutely.
Let me just remind our listeners that I'm speaking with the Reverend LaDana Clark. And Reverend Clark is known as LADYJAM, the outreach hip-hop pastor and founder of the Church in the Hood. I don't want to put you on the spot, but also in your bio, it says that when you were much younger, you had a problem with drugs and alcohol. So I wonder if you could share how you became dependent and what was your path to redemption.
Well, that's what put me in ministry, actually. And to be perfectly honest, unfortunately, bouts or substance abuse ran in my family. It was generational. And I had buried my several family members from substance abuse, and I was about to be next. But God came into my life, and that one particular night, I believe I was probably going to OD or die, and spoke to me, called my name, and I just happened to listen, and it was a, what do you call it? It was a spiritual experience that no one really can understand unless they've been through a born again type of experience with God. It's real personal. It's just you and the Holy Spirit, and your life has changed forever. And that's what happened to me in 1985, and I was clean ever since, from 1985 to now. I've had no going back, no relapses, no rehabs, no nothing. God just, instead of sending me to rehab, God put me on the road evangelistically, and told me to tell my story. And as I told my story, I continued to heal. And as people came up and said, "Thank you so much for your story. It was so heartfelt," it continued to heal me, and it just turned my whole life around and gave me a sense of purpose, and gave me the opportunity to help others be better and know that they weren't alone in that situation, and be able to talk about something from a standpoint of genuine, real pain and hurt and self-destruction that I experienced and that I witnessed personally, to help other people experience it and be able to possibly turn their lives around because they could relate better to me, knowing that I had been through it myself. So it was quite a journey, but God saved my life, and that's why I'm in ministry. I'm not in ministry because I decided to wake up one morning and be like a minister on television or nothing like that. I'm in ministry because it was personal. God made it personal, and LADYJAM, the jam stands for Jesus anointed me, because the Spirit identified which entity that was talking to me, and it was Jesus, and I'm so thankful and grateful. And I'll tell you one more story of confirmation. When I had my born again experience, God sent me to a Christian bookstore and told me to ask for a book called The Book. I wasn't familiar with a promotion on a Bible from one of the I think it was a 700 Club at the time, but God told me to go into the Christian bookstore and ask for a book called The Book. I didn't even know what a Christian bookstore was. God just said, get in the car, go down the street, make a left, make a right, and I did so, and I ended up at this Christian bookstore. Didn't even know it was in town. Didn't even know what that was. And at the time, I'm going to be perfectly honest, but I went in and I asked for the book, and it happened to be the Bible. And then, the Holy Spirit said, write your name in it. And when I wrote my name in it, the Holy Spirit then said, that's to symbolize that your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. Mm-hmm. So it's just been personal.
Well, that's a very personal story, but I don't understand. I don't mean to offend you.
No, you don't have to. You won't offend me.
But when I was a child, I prayed all the time, but I never heard anything back, if you will. The way I see it, God doesn't talk. I don't know how else to express it. You might be speaking to yourself,
No.
I don't see how God speaks.
No, God does talk, but God talks differently to different people. Can we agree on that? God does talk. God talks differently to different people. Now, God may talk to me audibly, but may not talk to you audibly, because that's not the way you learn. That we have different learning styles, and God knows each of our learning styles. So God may speak to you through books. God may speak to you through other episodes in your life, okay? But music is something that you hear. And so music is something, my ears are very, probably one of the most important things on my body. So God knew, in order to deal with me, God. I'm assuming that God would go through my ears. So I hear music, I hear things, whereas visual artists and stuff, they visualize things. Does that make sense?
Yes, I'm very attuned to what I hear more so than what I see as far as art is concerned. That's why I do radio.
Okay. Mm-hmm. So that's just help you understand what I'm saying.
Sound is very important.
Right. And I understand people may say, oh, how can you say God talked? That's their belief. But God talked to Moses. God talked to Jesus. God talked to, Paul. God talked to Daniel. God always talks. How God talks to people is different.
Let me paraphrase former President Barack Obama. He was asked if he prays and talks to God. And if I remember his response, it went something along the lines that he does. He says, yes, I do. And after I've done everything else that I possibly can do about a given situation, the only thing I know that's left to do is to pray, to talk to God. Is that something that you could relate to? From a
standpoint of God gave us a brain. I always think of the scarecrow when I say that. God gave us a brain for a reason, and as a matter of fact, when we were talking about doing this interview, I mentioned that. There are some things we don't have to bother God about because He's given us a brain. So you pray about I pray about everything. I don't do anything without praying. For me, praying is to keep God in front of everything that I do. So, of course, I agree with our former president of these United States on that particular fact. But everybody's way of, how can I say this? Everybody's approach to God may be different. And different for a reason, because we're all different people. So meditation, prayer is talking to God. Meditation is hearing from God. Okay, many people, anybody that studies that, they know whether that's hearing spiritual energy or getting spiritual energy or hearing from God. When I meditate, that's what I do. I want to meditate so I can hear from God. And It's a different thing for everybody. It's a different thing for everybody. And it's meant to be that way so that nobody can tell you or tell me how I should pray, how I should, what God is telling me. I can't tell you what God tells you, and you can't tell me what God tells me or doesn't tell me. And I can't tell you what God tells you or doesn't tell you. I don't have that right, and I also don't have, and I'm not God, so.
I'm speaking with the Reverend LaDana Clark, and Reverend Clark is known as LADYJAM, the outreach hip-hop pastor and founder of the Church in the Hood. And I wanted to go back to where sort of we began this conversation, and it was about the killing of George Floyd by a police officer. Do you believe the nationwide demonstrations will result in any meaningful change for the things we've been talking about?
Yes, I do. I have hope. I have hope that there will be some changes. This one feels a lot different from a whole host of others, unfortunate others. I believe that there are a lot more people who are, as the young people would say, woke or aware or have been awakened to different sides of this particular story in a way that I think is going to move us to some action.
What would you like to see happen specifically? What's the best outcome from your point of view?
Well, I know, first of all the officers have to be held accountable. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not. I don't have a degree in criminology, but I know they need to be held accountable by their actions that everybody could see. That's the first thing needs to happen, and then there are different laws on the books that probably need to be revisited, and there are some, as far as police training, there are some different trainings that need to be instituted because instead of policing as if other American citizens are enemies, there should be some balance in policing. I believe community policing is the best option to institute all across America, because I've been involved in community policing. It was great. I knew who was at the corner store. I knew who was the people at the businesses. I was at the city council meetings. I was the students from the school district. They knew who I was. I had, at one point, I was a associate pastor in Plainfield, New Jersey, and a young person actually came to who was attending my ministry. Actually got into a situation and came and turned themselves into me, and I was able to help them make a safe transition to the police because they were afraid that possibly the police may not handle them in such a way that they wanted my assistance and wanted me to be there. So, and then they also knew I was also a police officer in that city, so they were comfortable with me. So there are things that we can do, but if police have to be involved with community, and community have to be involved with police, and those things have to be worked out in different organizations and through the city and the mayor's office and offices and things of that nature to pass those particular things down to everybody in the ranks. So it's a lot of different things.
Some demonstrators are calling for the defunding of police. Do you believe that's part of the answer? I am not able to make any statements on that at this time because I'm not exactly sure what that's about. I know that the police can't operate without funds. They have to be funded in order to operate. So just like any other entity. But as far as well, there's the demilitarization aspect too, where the police officers should not have military-style equipment.
Well, you can have the equipment, but as far as how you use it, is very important, and when you use it is very important, because if some terrorist organization happens to get feet on the ground in the United States, I'm sure we would want to be able to protect ourselves and protect everybody. But you have to have training. Again, like someone was saying today, the SWAT units and stuff like that, they are specifically trained to use other ways or equipment. So their units are not the regular police officers. The regular police officers, they don't have that kind of training. So for them to have that kind of equipment, that would be a problem.
So let's create a scenario here just for the sake of it. What would you say to the demonstrators, the people who are actually on the front line of demonstrations, and you're on the other side, or you're standing in front of them, rather? You're not with the police in this situation that I'm saying. You're as a reverend. You're in the middle. What would you say to them?
As far as the protests and stuff, America's heard you. I hear you. We hear you. And keep lifting your voices peacefully, and let's get to work.
And what about the looters? What would you say to them?
Oh, I'm not even, that's a problem. As far as looting is concerned, that's a criminal act, So the only thing I could say to that is that's something that would have to stop. That's something that has to stop. It doesn't help the movement. It doesn't help the message, and it doesn't, help anybody. And at the same time, looting is not protesting, and or looting is not. How can I say this? Yeah, it's not a part of this protest.
It probably is hurting the cause.
Right, but also police officers who commit murder hurt their cause.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's a crime. It's a crime that should be punished like any other crime. It's murder.
And two wrongs don't make a right.
One last question for you. And the national outrage is about reforming policing and ending racism. President Trump says that it's not about that. It's about law and order. What would you say to the president if you had the chance to talk to him, and what would you say about his approach?
Wow. That's a whole nother interview.
Well, give us the thumbnail version, the Cliff Notes version.
Interview. First of all, let me say it doesn't matter to me which party is in office. Just that whoever it is that they are in office to serve all of the people of America in these United States. This president, unfortunately, has shown that he's not interested in serving all of America. So therefore, anything that comes out of his mouth, unfortunately, you have to listen with the understanding that it's potentially biased. The other thing is, I can't imagine what it would be, to give him just a little bit of credit, I can't imagine what it would be like to be the president of the United States with all the responsibilities. However, if you get into the ring, or if you decide to pull up to that job and be in that office, and then you have to rise to the task. And I don't believe this president has risen to the task of being a president for all the people here in the United States, or properly addressing this issue. Being a law and order president has nothing to do with establishing the proper services to the people of America who he's been sent there to serve. He's not in a servant. He's not in a serving capacity. He doesn't know what that is, and I believe that by his actions, I can see he's not used to it. So I can't expect this man to do things that he doesn't have any clue about. So he has a lot to learn, and just like many of us on different levels. So.
Were you offended as a minister that the president went to stand in front of a church and waved a Bible, and a church that he's never attended?
Without getting on his knees, without praying, without giving words to the families, without giving words to America in such a time as this, when we're dealing with a double pandemic, yes, I was very, very offended. And I take church property and that particular, whole, that's sacred to me. As a minister, I believe that's sacred and off limits. And then to find out from the Episcopal bishop that, he never even notified the church, never even gave them a courtesy call, to know that this was basically something he had in his head and decided to do on his own without consulting anybody. It's a derelict of his duties as president to disrespect the church like that. Mm-hmm.
The Reverend LaDana Clark. Reverend Clark is known as LADYJAM, the outreach hip-hop pastor and founder of the Church in the Hood. And Reverend Clark, thank you for coming on WIOX.
Thank you so much, Don. God bless you.
Come on. I don't care what it looks like. I don't care what the flow is. Let it be known that God is in control. And come on. Woo! Yeah. Woo! Yeah. Woo! Yeah. Now we're going to go to the book of John. When you going to the book of John, yeah.